Okay, let's talk about 2008, the year the entire world economy almost completely imploded. Now, what caused it? It wasn't a war, it wasn't some crazy natural disaster. Nope, it was something that happens every single day. People buying houses. That's right, home mortgages. Banks started failing, millions of people lost their homes, their jobs, and it all kicked off with the simple dream of owning a home. So let's dig into exactly how that happened.
I mean, how on earth does that happen? How does something so normal, so central to the dream of a stable life, become the detonator for a global financial meltdown? That's the big question we're going to tackle right here.
But you want to know the wildest part of this whole thing? This wasn't some illegal back alley operation. No. The system that caused this entire catastrophe was, for the most part, completely legal. And that right there is what makes this story so terrifying and so important to get our heads around.
Okay, so everything, and I mean everything, started with one simple but incredibly dangerous belief. It was an idea that took hold in the early 2000s and pretty much became gospel. Housing prices always go up. That's it. That was the foundation for the whole thing.
And that one single idea, it changed everything. All of a sudden, a home wasn't just a place to live, to raise a family. It was a golden ticket, a guaranteed investment. The mindset was, hey, why wouldn't I buy? I can flip it in a year or two for a huge profit. And just like that, you had a full-blown speculative frenzy on your hands.
And look, this wasn't some weird theory floating around on the fringes. Oh no, everyone bought into it. We're talking about regular folks buying their first house, all the way up to the biggest, smartest investment banks on Wall Street. Even the governments that were supposed to be watching over everything were on board. And that's the thing about a bubble, right? When everyone believes in it, it just gets bigger and bigger, faster and faster.
So, with everyone convinced that prices would never fall, what happens next? Well, that belief opened the door for some seriously reckless behavior. This is where the story gets a little tricky. It's where the financial wizards step in and create a system that was brilliant at one thing, hiding a mountain of risk in plain sight.
The secret sauce, the key ingredient in this whole mess was something called a subprime mortgage. Now, normally, banks are pretty careful, right? They only want to lend money to people with a good job, good credit, people who can actually pay it back. But with house prices going through the roof, they basically just threw the rule book out the window. They started handing out loans to people who, let's be honest, they know probably couldn't afford them long term.
It got so out of control, they actually came up with a nickname for the riskiest loans. Get this, ninja loans. And no, that's not a joke, it was a real term. It stood for no income, no job, no assets. Think about that. Lenders were giving people money to buy houses with literally zero proof they could pay it back. Why? Because everyone just assumed rising house prices would magically fix any little problems.
So this brings up a really obvious question, doesn't it? Why in the world would a bank lend money to someone they know can't pay it back? That seems like terrible business. Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. They weren't planning on holding on to that loan. They figured out a way to get that risk off their books and sell it to somebody else.
And here's the financial magic trick they used to do it. It's called a mortgage-backed security, or MBS. Now, it sounds super complicated, but the basic idea is pretty straightforward. You take thousands and thousands of mortgages, all those monthly payments streaming in, and you bundle them all up into one giant financial product. Then you chop up that big bundle and sell the little pieces to investors all over the globe.
But here's the really clever and dangerous part. The recipe for hiding the risk. Step 1, you take thousands of mortgages. Step 2, you mix the really bad, risky subprime loans in with the good, safe ones. Step 3, you sell the whole thing as one big, supposedly safe investment. It's exactly like hiding a bunch of rotten vegetables in a giant pot of stew. The bad stuff is still in there, you just can't see it anymore. The risk never went away, it just got camouflaged.
And then, to pour gasoline on the fire, the official referees of the financial system, the big credit rating agencies, came along and gave these toxic bundles their highest seal of approval, a AAA rating. That's supposed to mean it's as safe as you can get. So you had pension funds, governments from other countries, big institutional investors. They all bought these things by the billions, thinking they were as safe as gold.
And for a while, it worked. The party was in full swing. Money was flowing. But here's the thing. A system built on a shaky foundation, on a lie, just can't last forever. And eventually, well,
We all know what happened next. The whole thing came crashing down.
So what was the trigger? It was actually pretty simple. A lot of those subprime loans had these really low, attractive teaser rates for the first couple of years. But when those introductory rates ended, boom, the monthly payments suddenly shot up, sometimes doubling or even tripling. All at once, millions of people just couldn't afford their homes anymore. People started defaulting on their loans left and right, banks started foreclosing, and suddenly the market was flooded with empty houses. The bubble didn't just leak, it burst.
And as prices just cratered, a huge new problem popped up. People found themselves underwater on their mortgages. Imagine this. You owe the bank $300,000 for a house that's now only worth $150,000. What do you do? For a lot of people, the only sane financial choice was to just walk away. They'd literally mail the keys back to the bank and give up.
Okay, so this is the moment it stops being just a housing problem in America. This is where it goes global. Remember all those bundles of mortgages, those MBSs that were sold to investors all over the world? Well, the poison inside them was about to bring the entire global financial system to its knees.
And the dominoes fell so fast, it was terrifying. All of those super safe investments, they were suddenly revealed to be completely worthless. You had huge, legendary banks like Lehman Brothers going bankrupt basically overnight. The trusts, that's like the oil in the engine of the financial world, it just evaporated. Banks got scared and stopped lending money to each other. The credit markets froze solid, and the crisis jumped from Wall Street to Main Street. And that's when the mass layoffs began.
So, when the dust settled, who ended up paying the price for all this? Well, the giant banks that caused the whole mess were called too big to fail. They got bailed out by the government, using taxpayer money. And the taxpayers, the regular people, they lost their homes, their jobs, and huge chunks of their retirement savings. A pretty stark difference, huh?
So let's just quickly recap the root causes here. It wasn't just one thing, right? It was a total perfect storm. You had a flood of easy money that created the bubble in the first place. You had banks going wild with reckless lending. You had these super complex financial products designed specifically to hide risk. And it was all built on top of that one single blind belief that house prices would never, ever fall.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it's that the bill for this kind of widespread recklessness, it always comes due, sooner or later. And while the details might be different next time, those basic human ingredients, greed, wild speculation, and finding clever ways to hide risk, they have a funny way of rhyming throughout history. Which kind of leaves us with one big lingering question to think about, doesn't it? What bubble might be growing right now?